All right, here we are. So I have got our tiki going here. I've got all of the excess tape pulled off, and I'm happy with all the gaps. There's a few that are bigger than are entirely ideal. There's a couple here. There's a little bit there, but I'm not thinking that that's going to matter. Those of you that are really observant will notice I've got some little gloves on today. That's because we're going to be working directly with this white glue, and it won't hurt you even a little bit. You literally can eat the stuff, but I just don't want it all over my hands. I went ahead and mixed up my solution. We're going to add a skin on the tiki today, and I've got this solution added that is it's about 90% water and 10% Elmer's glue. And you can see I'm just going to mix it up here. You can see it makes the water look kind of milky. That's fine. You don't need to have a heavy layer of glue in it, or a heavy dose of glue in it, but putting a little extra glue in it doesn't do any harm either. You'll notice that it's pink. That's because I also put about a tablespoon of red tempera paint in there, because I just like being able to see. I figured it would be easier to see what has glue on it and what doesn't if you're for the skin, so that you can see what's going on with it. And it kind of helps me see, you know, where I've layered things on there. It just visually, it just makes it easier to keep track of what's doing what. So I'm just mixing up. I've got an old brush here. It's actually a new brush, but it's a little boar bristle brush that is nothing special. It doesn't need to be any particular size or shape. It's just big enough to. What I'm going to do with this is I can use it to kind of, once I've got the paper laid on, I can kind of dollop a little glue on there, and it's big enough that even if I let it go, it won't fall and lose itself in the bucket. This bucket, you don't have to use a bucket. You could use a butter dish or anything. I would use something disposable, because once this stuff dries, it's a pain. But the easiest thing to do now, we're just going to start with the beginning, and that's take a piece of, I've got copy paper here because I like the thickness of copy paper. If you have newsprint, that'll work. These are the biggest pieces you're going to use. I mean, any bigger than probably a 50-cent piece, and you start, the paper is just too big. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to lay a skin on the back of it. I'm going to wrap the skin around to the details, depending on how long it takes me. If if the spine here starts to dry, the skin that I put on the spine starts to dry, by the time I get around here, I might work on the nose. But probably what I'll do is I'll make two videos. One will be the basic, the spine, the back, and then tomorrow we'll work on finishing up all the details inside here. The whole process really doesn't take that long. You don't want to use a piece any bigger than probably that right there, which, you know, you can see it's about as wide as 2 fingers and maybe not really as long. So any bigger than that and you run into real problems getting it to lay flat. I'm going to dip it in the paper, or dip it in the glue. I'm just going to let it sit right there. I'm going to get several pieces of paper and let them sit on the side of the bucket here. And what that does, it allows that paper to soften. It's all good and coated with the material here, and this just allows that paper to soften. And you can't leave it very long because it starts to dry and attach itself to the side of the bucket. But a couple pieces there, I'll get them ready. And I can see here that there's part of the paper, I don't know if you can see it there, you can see the part of the paper is not really saturated. I'm going to dip it in there, and that's good to go. I'm wiping it on the side of the bucket. I don't want it excessively wet, but I'm going to take now, I'm just going to lay the first piece. I've got one straight edge here that's cut clean. I'm just going to put that right down here at the bottom, and I'm going to go put paper on both sides of this back seam, and I'm going to always overlap my paper, never leaving some gap. I'm going to go ahead and put a piece that's got a nice straight edge there. You see, take your finger and rub it down. And I don't want it to get entirely too wet, so I'm going to be cautious about that. And I'm going to start climbing the spinal area here. Now what this is doing is I'm creating a base, and I'm doing the back part first so that If it softens up, the whole front will still be kind of dry and help hold it together. I'm just laying pieces on, going back and forth from one place to another. I've got a little flipped over edge there. Don't want that, so there we go. Take a few more pieces and lay them in here. The whole process goes really fast once you get going on it. Before you know it, you'll have the whole thing covered up and be like, well, okay, now what? Well, at that point, you just want to sit. Now I'm going to put it down upside down so that any drips will go away from this area here. I want them to go down that way. And I'm going to tear up a little more paper. There's no harm in tearing up a pretty good amount of paper in advance. I'm just going to stick it all right there, let it figure itself out. Those pieces will be all right. Yeah, be all right. And there's some there. Uh-oh. Dropped one. One casualty so far. I'm just going to take and put this lengthwise across that gap. And just creating that barrier. See if we can find that piece that went away. Bye-bye. Yep, there it is. Well, we know it's good and saturated, so we'll go and lay it right on there. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of take them all the way to the seam that goes around here. I'm going to kind of create an area around the back side of it here so that it's got the first layer. I may or may not add a second layer depending on, after this is done, how heavy I want it to feel. Once it's done, if it feels pretty good, I might just let it go with one layer. You can add multiple layers depending on how sturdy you want your tiki to be. I like my tikis to be just sturdy enough to feel solid in the hand without worrying about 14 layers of paper. And as it happens, I'm usually kind of in a crunch for time because I usually build 3 tikis while my students build 1. So I kind of had to do it quickly. So one layer is entirely adequate most of the time. You know, your results may vary a little here and there, but by and large that gets the job done. And that piece is going to get a little more on it there. And that's how the process works right there. You can see I've got a little bit of paper stuck on there. It's starting to drip down the thing. One thing you have to be cautious for is if the water drips down, it will soften this edge around here, and if that's not what you want, or it will soften the glue joins around the mouth, and you can already see it starting to do that. So you want to be cautious and conscious of that sort of thing, because it will make your tiki come apart if you don't have a heavier enough layer of glue on there. So I'm just going to move on. Keep putting paper. Now I'm not going to actually touch that seam right there. I'm going to leave that so I can add a little glue to it if I need to tomorrow after it's dried. I'm just going to put this one layer on this, maybe 2, so it'll dry. I don't know what we're listening to on the radio, but it's a little obnoxious. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but we'll just let it go. Now that piece there, these pieces, these are a little big, so I'm going to rip them twice. And the shape of the pieces that you rip off, triangles work pretty good because you can wrap them around things really well. I'm just sticking all that in there and let it sit. I'll come back to it. Let's see, I'll start with that one. And keep coming back and layer that on there. There we go. You may not be able to see here on the table. It's starting to puddle up here, and it's going to soften this paper here. I want to be careful about that. I'm just going to move it. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll take some paper and move it around. The surface that I'm working on here is a tabletop. If you work on your tabletop, make sure it's a tabletop that it's okay if stuff gets on it, that it comes off easy, or that you don't care if it stays there forever, because this stuff's a little hard to clean up after it solidifies. It's just Elmer's glue, so it will clean up with sufficient water and elbow grease, but it can be challenging, so just be cautious. I don't recommend that you do this on the dining room table unless you've got something to protect the dining room table. So I'm going to start adding pieces onto the side now. You can see this process goes really fast. And I'm looking for lots of little pieces overlapping all over the place, and what that does is it smooths out any irregularities in the structure and gives me nice uniform surface to work with that doesn't have a whole lot of visible seams. That, like if I wanted to have a particular smooth texture on my tiki. Now this is a pretty big piece, so I'm going to tear it in half. A couple of triangles instead of one triangle. This is going rather quickly. There's not many ways to do this wrong that don't include making the paper pieces too big and putting them on too dry. You can make it too wet, in which case it's easy to fix. You just stop, let it dry for a little while. Mine's getting pretty damp. You can see it starting to drip around the bottom edge here, and that's okay. It's not collapsing under there. It's just I want to be aware of it. So I'm going to take and put some more, work my way down there. I'll wrap that pretty close around the front of him. It's better to avoid a lot of, you want to overlap on your super clean straight edges, because that tends to not sit as smoothly as the torn edges. The torn edges blend better. And you definitely don't want to use scissors to cut your paper up, because it gives you too sharp an edge and they don't lay as flat. I'm just going to wrap that around there. We're not going to go deep into this area here. I just want to get it wrapped all the way around the mouth area here so that I'm ready to wrap the mouth tomorrow. The last thing you put the paper in is the mouth tube, because leaving that solid as long as you can gives you a structurally more sound tiki. You want that paper there to be as strong as you can have it for as long as you can have it. As you can see, I'm starting to wrap that around there. It's moving pretty fast. Sometimes you want to take it and just kind of shake all the excess off of it. Or shake it right back in the bucket. You can see I'm making a pretty good mess here. But again, it goes pretty fast. And this whole process just goes just like this. So that's it. I'm going to do that all the way around. It's not really a whole lot of reason for you to sit through this whole thing, so I'm going to turn the video off here in just a second, but you get the idea. I'm going to, there we go, kind of wrapping around into the bigger areas here. You don't want, there you go. There it is. You can see what I'm going to do. I'm just going to wrap this whole thing here and come back to it tomorrow.